Hello, it's Kelly with Homesteading Hints again, and today we're going to talk a bit about seed saving. And actually, what we're going to be saving today are tomato seeds. There's a little bit more of a process with them, so we're going to just kind of go through that. But I can also tell you that we save seeds from uh, peppers, which are very easy. When the pepper is ripe, you can just open those up and scrape the seeds out onto a piece of wax paper. Uh, Watermelons, we save seeds from those, and those, obviously are just when you eat them, you spit the seeds out into a bowl, rinse them off a little bit so you get the sugar coating off of them, and then put those on wax paper. We've done muskmelon, which is a little bit more involved, but kind of similar to watermelon, other than you scrape the seeds out of the center and kind of wash them off a little bit and put them on, again, wax paper. We use wax paper because it doesn't stick to it, that you can scrape them off and whatnot. So we use that mostly. It dries well on those and everything, so we use that. Uh, we've done cucumbers. Cucumbers are a little bit different in the fact that you have to let them get overripe, meaning when they change to a yellow color, actually, and they get really nasty, big seeds, kind of ugly looking. You really can't use them anymore. That's when you actually save the seeds for them. We usually cut those in half and just take my thumb and run it right down the center of it, and it pops all the seeds out when they're really ripe. And you can just do that and run it right into a bucket of water if you want to on those, and let them rinse off. They have a little bit of a gel coating on them that you can kind of rinse off, and then you can put those again on wax paper. So, but today we're going to do tomatoes. Yeah.
Do you need to talk about a little bit about squash too
Oh
and
yes. Okay. Well, as
beef?
far as squash and things like that, we do save butternut squash. Um, that one, if you save any kind of squash, you have to be sure that you have to be a very long distance away from other squash of the same variety. Now, squash is in, I believe it's 5 different categories of squash. There's pepo, there's Maxima Machada, and a couple others. But we usually do the butternut squash, and that's the one we save the seeds for. We also do zucchini, but the zucchini is in the same family as pumpkins, so we generally don't save the seeds off of zucchini. But if the butternut are in there, they're in a uh, different genus or a different species as the zucchini and pumpkin, so they can be saved even if they're right next to them. But you'll have to look that up based on what kind of squash you're thinking about keeping. Otherwise, they have to be half a mile plus away from the other squash or other varieties of squash in order to keep them. So they're a little bit more difficult just because of that. Now, corn is another one we have saved before, but that one is very difficult in Iowa because you have to be like a half a mile to a mile away from the next nearest corn, which is fairly difficult to do in corn country in Iowa. What you can do on those if you want to is wait to plant them, watch the field plantings, and when they're done, give them, say, 2 or 3 weeks or maybe even a month before you plant yours. Then they will not be pollinating at the same time, and you can save the seeds off of those. Corn, you have to wait until it's completely dry as well before you pick it, so you're not going to be able to utilize the corn for anything in order to save the seeds off of it, obviously. So we don't do that anymore, really, but we have done those before. But okay, so again, back to the tomatoes. We have 2 varieties of tomatoes we're going to do.
And do these need to be spaced?
Yes, yes. Now, the tomatoes need to be spaced 30 feet apart is usually the recommended distance. They are a self-pollinator, but the wind and bugs can transmit pollen from one to another, but 30 feet is usually a safe distance because bees usually aren't doing any pollinating on tomatoes. So that is also the same with peppers as well, 30 feet. And cucumbers are a long ways apart as well. So if you're going to do cucumbers, you need to have just one kind of cucumber and hope that your neighbors don't have cucumbers as well, because they could be technically too close, because those are bee pollinated. So we do those occasionally, but cucumbers are also one that we generally buy seeds for. I haven't found one that's my favorite enough that I want to keep just the seeds for those. So we kind of tinker in just trying different varieties every year. So, But yes, the tomatoes, 30 feet apart varieties. And you saw when we were out in the garden when I told you that we were planting them 30 feet apart, and that you know, those were the ones that were separated from the rest of the tomatoes. That's these two varieties. Virginia Sweet is this one, and these are Bulgarian Triumph, two of our favorites, obviously. We have let them get a little bit overripe. I will not be saving any of the tomatoes from this for any of the tomato soup or anything like that, because they are technically, I mean, really getting soft and overripe, which is perfect for saving tomato seeds, because they're much more viable, or likely to be viable, the riper they are. So we just kind of let them in. You can see this one is too. It's split and it's really overripe as well. So you just kind of have to let those go. I mean, if you don't have too many tomato plants and you want to save ones and still utilize it, it's okay to utilize the ones that are just regularly ripe, which is fine. They'll still be viable for the most part, but there's a larger percentage of the seeds that are viable from one that's kind of a bit overripe. So you don't want them to be rotten, but you would like them to be as ripe as you can get them before you pick them. So, all right, so what I usually do, and this is a very simple process, but it requires a little bit of time. First thing, I will cut them in half, directly in half, the tomato. And as you can see on this one, this is Virginia Sweet. These seeds are all on the outer edge of it. And I'll take and I just squeeze the gel out of each of the little crevices in there. And I just kind of squeeze through and give them all a good squeeze. And most of the seeds are going into, this is just a bucket of water. And I will scrape some of these off as well, and we'll continue to squeeze and scrape. And the reason you're putting these in a bucket of water is because they do have a gel on them, and that gel can't be left on because it will cause them to mold if you allow them to kind of, you know, dry that way. They'll start molding on you. You don't really want that to happen. So this is the other half of it. These Virginia Sweets have quite a few seeds in them, but they're fairly meaty in the center. It's just the outer edge that has a pretty good amount of seeds in them. So they're not really, it doesn't require, if you're just saving for, say, 4 or 5 plants a year or something like that, what I did there's probably 50 seeds in that. I will save a couple more just because I like to get some genetic diversity, so I like to save them from different plants and different tomatoes just to get a little bit more diversity out of what I'm trying to do. But now they're in the water, and they will sink to the bottom, and I will actually leave them in this bucket for about a week actually, and it'll get kind of nasty looking, but all of the gel that's around the seeds kind of comes floating up to the surface, and you can then pour it off. And I usually rinse it several times with the hose, and pour onto it, and then run it through a colander and kind of rinse it off, and that gets rid of pretty much all of the gel that's on it. And then when that's the case, then after a week you can get all the viable seeds. They generally sink to the bottom and stay there, and pour them off, and then take them in with the colander and put them on wax paper, and we're good to go. And so they're fairly simple. Just the process of having to let them soak for a week or so is the only kind of different process on them. And like I said, cucumbers, you know, you kind of have to have them overripe and things like that, but a lot of the others are fairly easy to save. Watermelons and peppers and things like that. But
this will stink, so please put it away from where you don't want to smell it.
Yeah, they don't smell so good once they've been sitting for a week and the gel starts floating up to the top. But just rinse them off, and like I said, it'll separate from the seeds, and the seeds will go to the bottom, the gel comes to the top, and you're good to go. So I believe that's the whole process, and thank you for watching. Until next time.